What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of Summoner's Rift Team's live pod, and I'm here to talk about patch 25.18. Let's get into it. Last patch, I guess we're going to start by talking about 25.17. Some hits, some misses. We tried on AP Aurelia. We're not really willing to go much higher on many of the numbers here, and basically she's way too far off without doing substantial work, so we tried. There's like a 1% pick rate of Natural's Tooth, so people aren't very interested either. It's not very good. Off we went. Like, for reference, Neela Jungle had the same win rate, and more players were interested in playing that. So that's a more fertile ground than chasing down AP or Rally as far as we're concerned. Lane Kane is looking playable. Not amazing, but playable, and so pretty good hit there. There's some people playing it. Seems okay. AP Kog'Maw, we hit the goals around it not being better than bot lane Kog'Maw. It's not eating much of the pick right there. It's got a real play rate in mid. It's looking playable in mid lane, so thumbs up on that one. Set Jungle looking playable here as well. There's a moderate play rate there. Wins about half his games. Seems okay. Happy with that one. Vayne Jungle, we missed. Basically, I got really scared of the first clear feeling a little bit too fast, and so like on the last day, I pulled the early jungle mod, jungle damage on the W down, and ultimately that moved the clear too slow. Looking at, because there were players who tried it on live this patch, and it's like, oh, actually she's well below, like slower than the median jungler. Okay, well, we're willing to hit median in most cases, and so it's like, okay, we actually have room to add some back in. It might be that no one made the change actually, but my understanding is we wanted to throw a bone to Vayne W this patch. This actually might not have happened. I'll talk about my confusion in a second. But either way, we're willing to do small follow-up for Vayne Jungle. It's not super weak. It's not great, don't get me wrong, but there's none as we can make there. And then as far as all the minor balance changes, all of them were accurate. We kind of hit our goals there. So right, some things just like we didn't get them added really appropriately, and then some things like, oh, we, for all of the patch, we got what we wanted. So cool stuff. All right, so how about how my week went? Well, as I mentioned last time, I've been pitching in on season start, going pretty well so far. Talk more about that in a little bit. As for my involvement in this patch, not great, not much actually. So I got a kidney stone in the middle of last week. Started out pretty manageable, a little bit uncomfortable, but not a huge deal. And then by Friday, I felt inoperable as a person. Went to the hospital on Saturday, got some medication. Long story short, that was very helpful. I took Monday was a holiday. I took Tuesday off as a sick day. And then today was my first day back at work since like 2 p.m. on Friday. So I was in the call for reactive balance on Friday to make some decisions on which champs we went for. I checked my phone and was on Slack a little bit to guide some of the change lists. And then today we did a like last minute iteration on Talia that I was available and actually like full power for. But everything else in the patch I don't have strong context for, as I was delirious, a mix of being on pain meds, a mix of being unable to sleep, and in pain. It was not great. But yeah, better now. I worked a full work day and didn't notice anything. So back in action as far as I can tell. So anyway, as far as seasonal stuff is concerned, I guess I'll spoil a bit of what I'm working on. I mentioned this before a few months ago. One thing we think League is missing and can be improved is strategic variety. And the specific lens I'm going to bring up here is the risk and reward profile of playing for epic monster stacking and just kind of playing for jungle camps versus actually trying to siege the enemy base. And unsurprisingly, the risk of setting up dragon is pretty low. The risk of taking dragon actually also pretty low. I think doesn't hurt really at all. The risk of fighting the enemies under their tower or fighting the enemy tower is like, well, if they fight you, that tower is going to only fight you, not them. You can't dive them because there's a tower there. It's going to ramp up and it's going to 3-shot your AD carry if you ever have your tank drop aggro. There's a lot of risk in fighting around a tower. There's not a lot of risk in setting up dragon. Meanwhile, the rewards. What's the reward of killing a tower? Some gold. What's the reward of killing a dragon? Well, per stack, it's as valuable as the gold, but it also works towards soul. It also denies your opponent dragon. Well, the risk reward profile is not very close, and every team plays for epic monsters. So I am doing some work in terms of shifting the risk and reward profiles around in terms of making playing for towers better. Some initial changes are in. They are effective. There's more to do, but I am working in that space for now. If I start working other spaces, I will tell you about them because I enjoy doing that, but yeah, some progress is being made in improving strategic diversity in League of Legends, and I wanted to kind of share that with you all. Cool, let's move on. This patch story, we have the code fix in for the Rumble and Singe thing. My understanding of it is functionally the update actions loop checks at the end and says, hey, are there any scripts here that didn't run this cycle? That, like, I didn't run any of their logic. And it goes, if so, I need to run their logic now. And this means that no matter when you apply your, debuff to somebody to deal damage, it will check at the end of update actions, say, even if you added, partway through my checking loop, or, my normal loop, I've done a second pass through, I think. I didn't write the code. I couldn't read the code if I even saw it. But the explanation given to me and then now relayed to you is that it then checks again at the end and says, hey, anything not run? Okay, run it. So a fun story here is, so I went to, because I've been working with the engineer and the QA from Champ's team who've been doing this, I went to go and revert a lot of my script changes to get rid of that, because of course we don't need to now apply the burn late and apply a damage, at the very, very beginning. That's obviously pretty cumbersome. And so I got rid of all the logic and said, okay, we'll just apply the burn like normal and we'll move on. And in the case of Singe Q and Rumble Q, I'm just going to both call them burns. It doesn't really matter. What I noticed was that for some reason, so Singe was fine. Rumble was dealing 50% more damage on red side compared to blue side. And I was like, that's really, really weird. And what I had known for a while is Rumble, every update actually casts his Q twice. He casts where he aims it right now, and he casts it also halfway between where he was last time we checked and where he is now. So if you'll notice, and you do like 90-degree turns as Rumble, and you like aim here, there will also be one that goes there every time. Like if you flicker back and forth, there's no visual for it, but it will actually try to paint that group as well. And I was like, oh, it's because he's casting this spell twice. There's something weird going on. That's kind of weird, but okay. I don't know why it's only red side, but who knows, like weird ordering stuff. So I get rid of that logic casting twice. Nope, that doesn't do anything there. Okay, that's kind of strange. And so anyway, what I realized was it was my duration tracking was getting in the way, because basically I was saying, well, if you ever deliver a second, buff tick, get rid of it, right? Get rid of it, and then, get rid of this buff so that you don't deal a third tick of damage. Well, if you're red side Rumble, what's happening is the blue side opponent is taking his second tick of damage, because now, right, blue side opponents are taking one tick right away, which wasn't happening before, and then they take their second tick on the next update loop. That happens first, then red side Rumble goes, I should put this buff on you, by the way. I should hit you with this thing. And because it's already gone, it's a new buff. And then that new buff says, I haven't run yet. Yo, let's go look at this. And that does not happen even if you replace the buff in a normal way. But because I was hard deleting it, that's where we were. And so the case we're in now is, okay, well, I want Rumble to deal 3 total ticks of damage. One is always going to be at 0. One's going to be at 0.25 and one's going to be at 0.5. We're going to count to 3 functionally, and then we're going to be okay, and it's all going to work out. So solved all that kind of stuff, messed with duration, messed with whatever. Now it's fine. So did the police need to be policed? Fixed it. So Rumble, that code fix is in. If you notice any champions working differently next patch, our QA did go through and they checked everything they could. We made a list, pretty sure we're in a good spot, but hey, if you notice anything different, let us know. Other thing that I worked on this patch was Illaoi follow-up. So the complaint pretty much right away from Illaoi players when the changes came out was, hey, in the early game, when the automated tentacle attack timer from the spirit/vessel mechanic on the E is still early in the game, I can fail to get any bonus attacks from the vessel timer. And so I ended up being about half a day or so, between half a day and a day, I don't remember anymore, digging in and being like, okay, how do all these mechanics work? Because there's a lot going on. Tentacles, by the way, can queue up 2 attacks. Basically, it puts a buff on them, and the buff is here's who your target is, you should go attack, and then it runs the logic, whatever. And if it ever notices you already have the attack buff on the tentacle, it'll be like, oh, okay, inject some data into a data table that it knows after it's attacking to check the data table, and then remove its current target, add the new one, and then sequence that up after the appropriate amount of time, which is about 2 seconds. And I was like, Not messing with that. I'm not giving it a third attack to Q. I'm not going to do weird stuff there. Basically, if I gave it an attacker right away and just outright said force it in, it would basically guarantee the attack would land during a slow no matter what. That was really ugly. That was way too much power, I think, to give for a very late distributed hit. So ultimately, the fix that I went for that was the cleanest and didn't create even more new mechanics to try to figure out with Alawi was just increase spirit duration back another second, put it up to 4. It was still very meaningful, by the way. The net result of changing spirit duration from 10 to 3 was a meaningful reduction in elo skew. The total win rate delta is down a full 1%, which is a pretty big deal. So it'll probably go up like a 0.25% or something this patch as a result, but that's not nearly as big of a deal. Probably a bit less than that. And anyway, regardless, obviously that it is power to give Alawi more technical slaps on average and more technical spawns on average. There's this minor W nerf that I think we're going to have a slide for in the first place, but hey, by the way, stuff. And then otherwise, we just mostly have just balance changes for this patch. Overall, we are gearing up toward Worlds. There will be much more Worlds changes in 0.19. That is the intended ship date for most of them, but there are some stuff earlier on here in 0.18. Let's go forward. So we have systems changes and champion adjustments in this patch. So systems-wise, we identified that tank junglers are basically worse off going for the Bombies line than they are going for Leandries and Faded Ashes, and so we wanted to pretty meaningfully buff Bombi Cinder to be more comparable as a clear speed spike in the early game, and so we're functionally increasing Bombi Cinder's monster damage by a full 1/3. We're doing a much lighter buff here to Sunfire Cape, buffing the minion monster mod from 1.5 to 1.6. Okay. One thing I wanted to bring up, I think I kind of brought up, I was not heavily involved in this patch, and so I have a lot less context on why individual changes were made, and so I can kind of speak to face value what I think the changes will do, and in any case where I do have high context, I can talk kind of more about that one, but otherwise, again, I was not in there iterating with other people and making sure, so again, I just have less context in this patch overall, but still want to, do what communication I can here on this patch. So very minor bump here on Sunfire Cape, but okay, fine. Next is Mercurial Scimitar. Plus sanity, -5 MR is pretty clearly power positive on the item. It's also another ½ second on the speed buff when you go for a cleanse. So a pretty meaningful buff here to Mercurial Scimitar. This item should generally always be pretty low pick rate. It is a counter item. It is not a failing if this is the least picked item in the game behind Wardstone. It's just niche, and that's okay. All that said, I think the declaration, and I was around when we made this call, it's too under-purchased, and it feels like it's never worth buying, so a light buff here to Mercurial Scimitar. It's still not going to be the dominant item here, but it should feel less like it's dead weight when you pick it up. We have a bunch of champion adjustments here, just going kind of alphabetically, and by the way, there is a chance here that some of these items or these numbers are going to be inaccurate. I just straight up copied the PBE scrape on Reddit, except for one where I know the change is different here, or two actually in this case. So these could be inaccurate. Again, I'm not super high context on all these things, so sorry. Aurora's passive damage is getting changed pretty heavily. Now, this is one I do know some context around. For Aurora and Talia, I think are the two specific ones here. We are trying to push them away from the very tanky, Seraph's Leander's Riftmaker style of builds and push them toward more AP burst spike. So the tactic for this was lowering the base damage and upping the AP ratio. I think the break even here is mid-200s ability power, if I recall correctly. But anyway, yeah, a nerf to the functional base damage of the passive, a buff to the AP ratio of the passive. Yeah, not much to say. It's a numbers change that will eventually break even and say, hey, Aurora, you're going to have to build more ability power if you want good health damage in your passive. Okay. Briar, this is a change that August have been working on. Well, August have been planning to do, and for a while, we got the, he drove on all this. I don't think it came through anyone on SRT, but I was appraised a bit. We talked. It's all good for me. Yeah, so the expected result here is less low MMR skew for Briar in making the R less reactively dodgeable. Essentially, instead of at the start of the R cast, you hear the global warning that Briar's casting R, you're going to hear it at the end of the R cast, which is about a full second, which makes it a lot harder to dodge short to mid-range Briar Rs from Fog. This should be a very meaningful hitability increase for, again, these sort of mid-range Briar ults. It will require some relearning from players because experience from playtests. I'm not the Briar player in the playtest, but the Briar players who play her in playtests are like, yeah, I like led you way too far because of course you dodged second late, so I missed it. So there's going to be some relearning to do for Briar players, but the expectation and the goal here is that it's a bit more in her favor and that she can land R by playing a bit smarter and a bit cheekier. Now, that said, that is obviously quite a bit of power, and Briar is statistically incredibly performant, especially in lower MMRs. And so August is also pairing this with several nerfs, an adjustment. So the first is removing entirely the bonus AD ratio on the R. This is also being paired with a 10% AP ratio increase. I mean, to be fair, I think it's fine. I don't think AP Briar is particularly good, but whatever. If he wants to do it, he can do it. It's not a big problem. But yeah, 0.5 on the bonus AD ratio is going to be a meaningful hit for when it does hit. Okay, fine. Of course, Briar R already hits more in low elo than high, so I think he's going for a low elo skewed nerf. Next is adding about 2,000 to the range. If from memory this is like 10k becomes 12k, it still won't fully cross map. You can't just hit the fountain if you miss the mid laner. But maybe get some more interesting, really long range snipes. Might be good, might be bad, but should be fun. The Q damage is being reduced from by 0 to 20, and it's going back to physical. Now that we have other health ratios on the kit, we're not too worried about lethality Briar. Dealing physical damage helps Black Cleaver work better, which is a nice thing. And if lethality Briar is an ult build, that's fine. Like the goal, I believe, was never to fully kill lethality Briar. It was to make Bruiser Briar actually good and I think correctly so her best build. But the alt builds are fine, and so it being physical damage will help lethality Briar be slightly stronger. Okay. Next, we are... so as I mentioned, the follow-up on Talia is 1 second up on the E2 duration, the Vessel duration, also nerfing the total AD ratio on W by 0.5% per 100 total attack damage. This line is usually going to be about 0.75% of win rate, which is also what gameplay analysis ballparked this buff to be worth. So that is the change here. Expected result is roughly win rate neutral. Again, if Illaoi sucks, we can just buff her back up again. It means she's in the patch notes for like the 5th time, but oh well. Those are the Illaoi changes. Talia, the goal here is, again, to reduce her... So it's basically, it's make her a little bit more reliant on having high amounts of ability power, and make her less reliant on needing a Seraphs to be able to play her kit out. And so taking 10 flat mana off the Q, and taking 0 to 20 mana off of the E. So 5 off of the rank up on E there. And I know there were a lot of changes that floated around in the PvE, but ultimately, as the goal is to not take away very much win rate, 0 to like minus 0.5 realistically, but push her build to be a little bit less safe for pro play stillness, essentially, is just taking some base damages down, which means that playing for a highly durable cooldown focus build is less powerful because there's fewer base damages there, and leaving the AP ratios intact, which are already relatively good. I think there are some that could be adjusted, but like the Q AP ratio is very good, for example. It's already a really high AP ratio relative to base damage on the Q. And so this is, well, you can't rely on your bases as much, which means the value of haste goes down, which means the value of any repeatable pattern goes down, aka durability. But the absolute value of ability power hasn't changed, and the relative value of ability power has gone up as a portion of your damage output. So again, some buffs there for not needing tier as badly, and some nerfs to try to move the build around. Okay, let's move on to the direct buffs. So Amumu, if we can, we'd like to have nudged this toward Amumu support some. Amumu support is going to Q-max, and so taking 2 seconds off of rank 5 of Q means Q-max Amumu is going to be straight up stronger. Amumu jungle's most common and most performant build order is Q-max second as well, and so Amumu jungle will feel this a little bit. There is technically a mana cost nerf levels 1 through 7 for, well, not level 1, level 3 or 4 through 7 It's a really minor point in time for Amumu jungle. Also, he's a jungler. Mana costs are not real for that role. But for Amumu support, guess what? He gets up to 15 mana back on his first max. 15 mana, 5 mana at rank 1, just, not going to be a big deal when he gets, rank 2Q at level 4. So that's all going to be fine. Ashe getting a direct 1% win rate buff, 0.5 AD growth. We were electing to not make her a big lane bully again. The pro jail version of Ashe made her have to be really weak, and she's at a, relatively good spot now where we have room to buff her, and she's already not, seeing a ton of pro play, so we have the space. That looks pretty good. Cassiopeia, we are generally going for early game focused buffs here. Going to keep nudging her in that direction to give her more early agency. So 50 flat mana at level 1 is going to give her basically 1 more E cast for the most part. And then adding 3 damage per rank up to the poisoned bonus damage on the E. So not level 1, 2, 3 bullying, but level 4 and onwards, spiking at level 9. More early game power, right? More spells to cast, more damage in early game, better Cassiopeia. Garen gets a 2% total AD ratio per hit buff. We think it's going to be fairly meaningful. He has room for, I think, about 1% win rate or so. I suggested to the person who did this to do total AD to keep nudging toward things like Cleaver Shojin, to keep nudging toward Conqueror over Phase Rush, and we already wanted to go for E damage, so pretty direct, straightforward Garen buff there. Hui, we have room to buff, we think. So 5% ability power ratio on the passive. WQ, which is speed, is a flat 10% move speed increase, as well as 1% per 100 ability power on the AP ratio of the move speeds. That's going to be even more in the later game. And 5% AP ratio, pretty minor on the E to make those hit a little bit harder. Just some gold scaling make Hui a better mage carry in the mid lane. Jace is getting some early game low rank Q damage, make him a better early game lane bully. This is aimed largely at pro, although Jace has room for generic solo Q. Mastery adjusted, Jace is actually pretty performant. Last I looked, I did not look this one up specifically myself, but last I had looked, Jace was technically good based on mastery, but doesn't have very many high mastery players, and so his win rates look pretty bad in most cases. Regardless, we think we have room, and so some early game damage on Jace Q. This is range Q, if I believe. Yeah, this is specifically range Q. Vel'Koz E is losing 2 seconds on its cooldown, so he has more reliable and either self-peel or fishing for setting up a combo, and then also some large flat damage increases on the R. I personally championed for rank up damage on R. R's rank up is already it looks very, very bad. Also, I think we should skew our Vel'Koz buffs toward mid lane, and so I urged the person doing the changes who was already looking for R damage to do rank up damage instead of AP ratio, because I think, again, I actually think the rank 3 damage in this spell is pretty bad for what it requires of him, and so, yeah. I think that's valuable. And then Zac, R now grants ghosting. This is a real change. Zac R does not give him ghosting on live. This is end steps change specifically. He's like, yeah, actually, it doesn't do it. People thought it did. It doesn't. So he made it work and added it to the tooltip. Direct nerfs. Annie. Yeah, Annie is, I think, incredibly strong. There's a couple things going on here. One, WMAX Annie is her best build. I know I nerfed it some in an earlier patch, taking 20 damage off of W's rank 5. We're doing it again here, which is wise, because it's still best. Anytime the best max order is unintuitive, this ends up making champions look weak relative to their actual power level. I think it tends to look pretty bad when that's the case, because people are like, why are you nerfing Annie? She sucks. Like, no, you're bad at her. Like, it's just, if it's unintuitive, that's a bit of a problem. Just like straight up, that's just true. Regardless, again, taking that down, because pros actually do this. Pros properly, play Annie correctly. She is very strong. Some of that is players are unoptimized. Some of that champions are really strong. So taking a lot of early game power, right? A level 9 spike here for, properly played Annie here. Also a level 6 and 11 power decrease, and then at level 16 it's the same champion there. So yeah, basically a sort of late laning phase, very focused sort of set of nerfs here to Annie. Hopefully make her a little bit less pro-dominant, and again, lower her power level some in the hands of people who actually know what they're doing and skilling the right abilities. Azir arguably scales too well. I do think, for what it's worth, regardless of what you might see Azir's solo Q win rate be, actually it's pretty good right now, relative to Azir's history. For Master Adjusted, and also taking a look at what this champion actually is and does, I think Azir is probably 1% OP for solo Q, straight up. Yeah, I actually think Azir is solo Q OP right now. You may disagree. That's fine. It's what I believe as a champion. and of course is, yeah, another big pro menace. And so doing some of the mid lane shifting right now, taking 0.5 AS growth should be in the ballpark of 1% win rate to Azir, and then also 5% AP ratio on the W is also, from recollection, about 1% win rate on Azir. And so we go back and forth, and it's coming up for Worlds. So guess what? It's time for Azir nerfs, and guess what? We'll probably buff him somewhere else after Worlds. Great. Galio, fairly stale mid lane champion here. We're nerfing both ability power and non-ability power, which I think is the right thing to do here, taking down some damage that Galio can be continue to try to be a bit of a more distinct champion, where it's like when you play Galio, you're really playing, you know, a bruiser, not a burst champion. So 5% AP ratio off the passive, and then up to 2% max health off of the Q damage over time. Of course, you're not always going to get all that damage there, but some straightforward Galio nerfs. Kiana losing -2 AD. Players have finally glommed on to the fact that have realized that, yes, Kiana is in fact overpowered. We knew that coming in when we buffed her last time, right? Had low pick rate, had no ban rate. We gave her, I think it was only about 1% like net. And it was like, well, 1% OP Kiana is the best champ of the game. Yep. So, well, you know, trying to move her back down. So changes here, -2 flat AD. Now we think she's OP in mid and jungle both. So trying to be a bit equivalent about the changes here. So -2 flat AD, -0.2 armor growth, and 5% bonus AD ratio on the passive. So it's a mix of early game and scaling, not skewing too hard toward one or the other. And yeah, you know, some damage, some durability, continuing on the armor growth trend, which I think is the only armor growth change we have this patch, but we could have done more probably, but whatever. It's not a big deal. Yeah, it's a mix of early game and scaling, and there's some Kiana nerfs. Sylas, arguably, I would say, is still a relatively balanced mid laner. Did launch ultimately stronger than I anticipated or hoped in jungle. Kept gaining win rate by day, and so by like the time 0.17 went out, it was like, Sylas jungle could have been nerfed. Definitely could have nerfed that. So we did at least land properly at median clear speed, though, which is cool. So this, of course, will push him slower than median clear speed, which I think is fine. He will still, I think, have a very real player base. It is important that Sylas feels like he can clear the jungle. Otherwise, he like 1 camps and evades you, or 3 camps and ganks. And so it's important that like, he can feel like he can jungle. We also have to make sure his win rates are okay, right? So I think this should be fine. 0.2 off of this shouldn't be terrible. We'll see, of course, if we have to give a little bit back, we will. Maybe 1.4 is actually the right multiplier here. I guess we'll see. But as always, we'll measure and see where it goes. But Sylas jungle is definitely OP right now and deserving of a nerf. Volibear has risen to the top of the jungle, as we've been generally playing whack-a-mole with the most performant junglers. Volibear is next up here and is kind of the guy, as his primary build is AP Volibear, and we would like if AD Volibear were viable. Well, we have more room for it by nerfing the ability power ratios, then AD Volibear doesn't take any nerfs at all. I believe Volibear is too good on top as well as jungle. Don't quote me on that one, but I'm pretty sure that's true. Passive AS AP ratio down by a quarter, essentially, so a little bit less hyper fast wizard bear when he builds his AP items. And then finally, we are taking a pretty big swing at Yunara. I mean, I knew by like day 6, Yunara was probably something like 3% or more overpowered. Just took people a long time to figure it out. It was funny. I remember the early cries where Yunara is incredibly weak, garbage champion, and then people learned, and the ban rate climbed back up, and the pick rate climbed back up, and then, yeah, she's still overpowered. She's like top 2 AD carries in pro. Rightly so. I mean, she should be number 1, but whatever. And so the strategy here, from recollection and catching up with chats and whatnot, is we are looking to swing hard. And because LPL plays on 0.18, we'll have an entire postseason to look at and be like, hey, did these nerfs kick Yunara entirely out of pro? Or is she still top 2? Or is she like the golden number of about 30% pro presence? And if so, okay. So that'll be a big test for us, to be honest. But it's, yeah, a pretty meaningful set of Yunara nerfs. I'm going to ballpark this at about 2.5% win rate. Maybe it's a bit more, but again, I think she can legit lose like 3% or so and still be at least balanced, if not still OP. I'd have to double check. I haven't checked the numbers in a while, but last I checked, it was like, yeah, this champ is clearly OP and people have to get there. And again, she's still a new champion, right? And like pretty clearly has a mastery curve. So -25 health is going to make her certainly much more fragile and bullyable in the early lane, especially if you're going to be a strong laner. -3 AD is going to be a pretty big deal, Now, super early last hitting is actually going to be pretty tough. She only gets 5 on hit damage per rank on Q, so you have to kind of wait till rank 2 of Q until you can last hit like regular champions. So it's going to do some weird things. Sorry for everyone who's trying to do muscle memory for last hitting. It's going to be harder for you in the early game without Q active. The passive is, of course, going to be, again, it's still not going to be as much as normal AD carries typically get until rank 2. I think it's going to be learnable, but it's certainly going to make her trading a lot worse. And then, minus 20 flat AS on the E. So I think instead of 50 to 70, it's 30 to 50, 1.5x while running toward enemies still. Now keep in mind, high move speeds have diminishing returns, so like the true impact of this is lower because she was hitting diminishing returns when running towards enemies and even running away in a lot of cases. And then the duration no longer scales up with rank, so instead of being 1.5 to 2.5, just 1.5 flat. I think this might shift her over to maxing W second. I think it'll be competitive. From recollection, E max second is clearly correct. And that might not be the case anymore, so we'll see what happens there. And I believe that is the end of the patch. So hopefully this was entertaining. Hopefully this was interesting and entertaining. Again, I'm missing context on some of these changes and so overall, because I was just out sick for a day and a half of exactly when we were doing most of these changes here. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.